Hey guys, Metal Jesus here. Today I'm feeling a little bit nostalgic, so I thought I would share with you some of the cassettes that I have in my collection, as well as the portable players that I have collected over the last couple decades. Now, I'm mostly a collector of vinyl records. That's what I'm most passionate about when it comes to collecting music. However, I am a child of the 80s and I did listen to an awful lot of cassettes, both, walking down the street with my Walkman, as well as frankly in my car. And so, for many, years and a couple decades, it was really both. It was, getting the vinyl record and then also the cassette version. And so I do have a soft spot for cassettes, even though I don't buy them that much anymore. And I got to be honest with you, opening this up today, this cassette holder that I have, it brought me back, man. Some of these cassettes I've had for literally decades, bought them brand new, some of these. And it kind of covers a bunch of different genres here. And so many of these that I'm showing you here on the screen are, man, just so much nostalgia here. And, a lot of these I bought brand new back in the day. I've had them in my collection because no way could I ever get rid of some of these. They're so iconic. So many good memories listening to these albums on cassette. But it's more than just full albums, actually. I am a big fan of cassette singles. Do you remember those? It started with the 45 back in probably the 50s and the 60s, but it quickly moved to cassingles. That's where you would get, the hot new single from your favorite artist. But my favorite thing about them was that often on the other side, they would have an unreleased B-side, or maybe a different mix of an album, or a live version, or, maybe a cover version of another band's songs. I love that. Those cassingles would also have different artwork, and it made it fun as a fan to be able to hunt those down and add those to the collection. Not very practical because obviously it was just one or two songs and you end up flipping it over. But looking back today, I think they're pretty fun to collect. I think they're pretty special. Another thing about cassettes, especially back in, the late 80s and early 90s, when I was working at a music store in Washington State, was that often the music promoter and distributor would send to basically, radio stations and record stores like us, advanced copies of albums that were coming out. And so you see a couple of them here that I've kept over the years, and these are pretty neat. Back in the day, you didn't really think about it because you got new albums every week. But now this is pretty cool. What's been interesting to see as a music fan and collector like me is the resurgence of cassettes and new titles being released. It all started with vinyl records, and yet here we are today where new albums are being released on cassette. You see a couple of them I have here, including The Guardians of the Galaxy. That was one of the first brand new cassettes I bought in decades. But then also a new Ghost release there, and also a Norwegian metal band that also released their album on cassette. So not something that I buy often, but it does bring me back, man. It's like you would buy the cassette because you wanted to listen to it in your car. Now, when it comes to cassette players, I definitely prefer the portable kind, because even as a kid, I was blown away by the technology that would be packed into these devices that essentially allowed you to walk around and bring your music with you. People today may forget, or especially younger people, these were the iPods of the day. These are groundbreaking at the time. And so over the years, I've kept some of my original ones. I've found some in thrift shops, and I've had some people donate them to me that were going to throw them away. And so I have 7 of them here I wanted to share with you. The oldest one I have in my collection is this one from Sanyo. So this was released back in 1983, and its model number is MG15. And you can tell it looks like an older cassette player because it has all these sharp angles and this really clean look. Also, too, it's kind of interesting because the buttons are actually really well labeled here and easy to read. This is something that's kind of missing on some of the later models that I'm going to show you, especially some of them that were from Sony. This one's kind of weird because it has a balance option. So this is where you could adjust the panning of the audio to the left or right channel. And that's something that you typically do not see on a portable cassette player going forward. And this one happens to have it. Another odd thing I noticed about this one when using it this week, and it's admittedly small, but it's kind of weird that the cassette doesn't automatically pop out when you open the cover. That's pretty much how almost every Walkman style portable cassette player works going forward. But for this one, you actually have to push the stop/eject button, almost like kind of like a standalone cassette player that you would have built into your stereo. So I thought that was kind of funny. Also notice on the front of this, the big selling point is this feature called anti-rolling mechanism. So, you know, what is that? Well, basically that's an internal flywheel that's inside the cassette player. And essentially what it does is it's used to minimize audio distortion. So this is very handy whenever you are jogging or, you know, moving around with this, because typically you would have something called wow and flutter that could occur if you didn't have this flywheel built into it. So it was one of those things where, you know, going forward, all of them had, because that was a big issue. Now check out this one from General Electric, and it's kind of in its own league because it's not really designed to be a typical, you know, Walkman style cassette player, because this one, as you'll notice, well, it's got a bunch of additional features for both recording and playing audio. For instance, on the top of this one, it has a built-in microphone, and as well as it gives you the ability to adjust the microphone sensitivity. And then notice there's an analog counter, and you use that to basically get back to specific moments. You know, if you want to recall something that you recorded, maybe, you know, something that was said, or maybe even the beginning of a song. And then there's a big old speaker on the back, and you have the ability to adjust the speed of that playback. So, you know, in general, this is probably used for you to record, say, a lecture or someone giving a speech. However, for me, I actually would record I'd record bands that are playing live with this thing, and yeah, it didn't sound great, but at the time, it was pretty cool. Next up is my favorite Walkman in my collection, and you'll see why, because basically it's just got almost every feature you would possibly want. This one was released in 1995, and it just has a ton of features, you know, including things like Dolby B noise reduction. Also, there's 3 levels of mega bass, which is pretty important because back then, you know, the headphones that you would wear for the most part didn't really have a lot of bass. And so having a portable device like this that could compensate for that actually made a huge difference. But the features on this one don't stop there. It's also got auto reverse, which is really nice. That's something that when it started showing up in Walkmans, I was like, ooh, fancy. But it doesn't stop there, because it's also got like a digital clock that still works today. As a matter of fact, I have it sitting on my desk at work, and it's one of the clocks that I look at, actually. It's also got an automatic volume limiter. That's the AVLS there. You may have noticed that this thing has a feature called TV sound. So what is that? Well, back in the analog days, some FM radios like this one could pick up TV audio if they were able to tune into the right frequency. So back then in the 80s and the 90s, TVs used to broadcast their sound using a standard FM signal, basically tucked right next to the video. So if your Walkman radio could pick up those frequencies, well, then you could actually listen to TV. But you're probably wondering, well, why would you want to do that? Well, a lot of people would tune in to hear a sports game, right? If it was being broadcast on television, well, you could still listen to the audio on your Walkman. And it was the same thing with weather. So again, you didn't have to have a full television with you. You could just be listening on the bus or traveling in a car and pick up and listen to weather or breaking news or sports. So it's kind of a cool little feature. And then here's another Walkman that I am very nostalgic for. I carried this around with me for years, and I still think it looks really cool today. That, of course, is a Sony Sports Walkman, and it just has this really cool, iconic yellow look to it. And basically these were designed to be water and dust resistant, not necessarily proof. You wouldn't want to dive with these, but you could take them on hikes, you could take them on walks and things like that and not have to worry as much about them getting damaged. And a couple ways that they did this, if I open it up here, you see that there's a rubber seal around the entire opening there, as well as the battery is actually on the inside. So it normally would be on the out. Here it's being protected on the inside. And then it has that clip that seals it up, almost like a piece of Tupperware. And they made headphones that match. So I have a pair of them right here, and not the most comfortable headphones that were ever made, but you know, they work pretty well. And again, they're yellow, so it's kind of cool. And these were really well built. I mean, this one still works today. And if I'm going to be going on a walk and I want to take my Walkman with me, this is probably the one I'm going to take because it is Seattle and it could rain. Here's another Sony Walkman that also was released in 1996, and this one is a little bit cheaper feeling. And this is around the time when you started to see some of these, you know, companies like Sony release high-end versions of Walkmans if you wanted, you know, all the features, or if you just wanted to maybe save a little bit of money and you could get something like this. This one here has a couple extra features that other lower end ones don't have, like the mega bass and also the auto reverse. And over the years, I've definitely added some of the other, you know, competitor Walkmans to my collection. You see a lot of these here in the wild, and a lot of them are actually, you know, they come from Japan. They're really well made. They still hold up today. The things you kind of have to worry about is that sometimes the belts on the inside might have deteriorated, and so, you know, they won't necessarily play anymore. Also, sometimes you have to go in there and grease some of the gears. But for the most part, the electronics hold up and still work today. And then this is the newest one I have in my collection. This was released in 2002, and it's part of the sports line of Walkmans. Again, just more updated, but the quality is definitely still there. And one of the things that this has that I really like is that they got it down to where it only takes one AA battery. So very efficient, still holds up today, really well built, very rugged, and I think it looks beautiful. It has that kind of, you know, early 2000s aesthetic. I think it looks so cool. And so that, guys, is a quick look at my cassette collection. And I have to say that this has been really fun kind of going back. I didn't realize I was as nostalgic for this as I thought I would be, because some of these have been sitting in drawers for quite a while. But it's been really fun this week to put fresh batteries in these and walk around listening to music on cassette this week. And, you know, while I mostly collect vinyl records, you know, I'm happy that there's an entire, slightly younger generation than me that are nostalgic for cassettes. Because it is pretty cool, you know? It's cool to be able to own the album, own the music, and take it with you like this. And yeah, it's pretty cool. But I would love to know what you think. Are you nostalgic for cassettes like me? Do you have some in your collection? And, you know, what models of portable cassettes do you think I should pick up next? I'll be honest with you, lately, they've been kind of hard to find in thrift stores and pawn shops, you know? They're just of that age where I think a lot of them either got sold at garage sales or they ended up in landfills, which is kind of a bummer. But anyways, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.